What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. Or, of course, if you are watching on our YouTube channel, that is Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me for today's podcast, got our very own publisher, Andrew Jones, and our director of basketball recruiting. He's also an analyst for us as well, David Sisk. And guys, we're here for a basketball subscriber Q&A podcast. We posted a thread on our board, I guess about a week ago, and asked some guys, some of our subscribers, they had any questions for us related to UNC basketball this season and recruiting as well. Go ahead and throw them in there. Got some really good questions in here. So we're going to go ahead and run through those here in a second. And obviously got AJ and David here to discuss them. But before we dive into that, I want to shout out our sponsor, Rogue Apothecary. They specialize in top shelf family grown hemp products. So, Delta 8, CBD, whether you're looking for gummies, tinctures, oils, whatever it may be, check them out. Link to their website is below. You can also save at Rogue Apothecary as well by using the promo code TARHEELS10. I know AJ uses some of these products as well to cool down after games and after a long day of work. So I know the CBDs work well for.
Well, it's to sleep.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I don't have a cool. I go from finishing work to.
It's hard to
letting the dog out.
It's hard to disconnect. Even I struggle with it after games. Like I can't.
I just can't this time of year because the overlap is such a grind that
football and basketball.
I go to bed and the whole day is still there because I don't have a cutoff time. So the CBD oils helped.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely helps. So definitely, if you're into that kind of stuff, looking for that kind of stuff, they grow all their products out in a farm in Oregon as well. So it's really good quality stuff. You can check out their website. Like I said, link in the description below, and save with the promo code TARHEELS10 if you're going to purchase anything. Make sure you use that promo code. But guys, that's enough of the promos for this one. Let's go ahead and dive into the questions on this podcast. The first one we're going to run through, this is more directed towards AJ. So I'll ask AJ this one. David, if you want to chime in afterwards and add anything, feel free. This is from G Dean 44, one of our subscribers. And here's the question: is the Hubert Davis positive approach, in quotations there, real or just what we see? In other words, is the staff's and players' relationship really as friendly as it seems? I can talk about this a little bit as well from the practice we went to. I know we saw Hubert. I think we saw the fire that Hubert has in that open practice. And I know we talked a lot about that in the video we did and some write-ups we did after that. But AJ, in terms of that question, what is your thoughts on kind of the positivity we tend to see from Hubert? And I think how a lot of fans view him, because I think there is another side to him as well.
I definitely want David to comment on this too, but my experiences through doing this for a long time tells me that ultimately, whoever a coach is, the kids see it and figure it out. Mm-hmm. So if a coach is a jerk, the kids end up figuring it out and they see he's a jerk. If the coach is someone who doesn't have enough control in the program, doesn't lead very well, then you'll see that over time. If a coach is just an amazing communicator, knows the buttons to push, you'll see that. Like I thought Roy was really good at figuring out the buttons to push with kids. The fact that Roy, the greatest coaching achievement Roy had at Carolina was getting Rashad McCants on the same page with the rest of that team the last couple of months, 2005, and they won a national title. With a 16 team, Roy figured out Bryce Johnson's button to push when he was early in his junior year. Same thing with Kennedy Meeks. And they got to a title game one year and won the next year. Kennedy's 25-12 in the Oregon game in the national semifinals. That was a byproduct of Roy figuring out the buttons to push there, and it paid off. So what I'm going a long way to get to the answer to your question. It's still early in the Hubert tenure, but I think these kids know him because he was already in the program. Mm-hmm. It's not like he came from, some other program and they all shook hands and introduced themselves back in April. So I think the kids already knew who he was, but they really know who he is now. And I think Hubert's nature is to be very, very positive. I think Hubert's nature is to hug instead of push. I think Hubert's nature is to tell kids how good he thinks they can be and maybe not lacing it with a lot of negatives. At the same time, as you alluded to, we saw Hubert kind of chew some in that practice. I saw him chew the team out in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. That wasn't a guy who was hugging people. That was a guy who had the fist clenched. Mm-hmm. And the problem is he couldn't connect that to his team. There was no electrical connection to getting them to clench their fist. They just didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't have the ability to bring that out of them. Sometimes great coaches can't do that. Sometimes coaches who are very new and are going through these experiences for the first time have to learn how to do that. So whatever Hubert tried the other day, whatever he said the other day, didn't work. Whether it didn't work because he didn't do it the right way, or whether it didn't work because the kids just weren't dialed in and their psyches were wounded, I don't know. So the answer to the question is we don't really know. I think the kids really like Hubert personally. He doesn't degrade them.
No.
And a lot of coaches have. And I noted something about that a couple of weeks ago when I wrote that piece about the power of positivity. Hubert kind of relies on that more. And this is in an era when I think we're trying to get back to that in coaching. The Bobby Knight way has been frowned on here for a while now, but there's still a lot of coaches that coach like that. There are a lot of football coaches that coach like that, and it works for them. I think in the end, coaches need to be who they are because kids are going to see it over time. So when a coach tries to be something that they're not, then it's not going to be effective because the kids, they won't properly connect to it. So I think Hubert's power of positivity is his approach. Mm-hmm. We're still learning as a media and covering him. I asked him a question last week or a week and a half ago about Justin McCoy and Kerwin Walton in particular, because when people have said, asked him questions about why can't those guys play more, or what do they need to do, or along those lines, he goes back to the same answer every time and ends up talking about how good they could be and how much they're going to help them down the road. So I asked him for specifics. Now, use the word specifically, what is one thing they must do? And he gave the same kind of answer. He didn't give a specific. So I asked a follow-up, well, do you have these conversations with them? And he said no. So I don't know whether he is or not. I mean, coaches don't have to be honest with us all the time. And it's not that they're lying. It's just that's their way of letting out of the program whatever they want to reveal from the program, right? But if Kerwin and Justin are getting their message from Hubert through what he tells us, and then they're not playing, then you could see where there might be an issue. I have no idea. I'm just supposing that. I would think that Hubert probably does have those conversations. He strikes me as the kind of guy that when a kid comes in the office for a 5-minute chat, it lasts 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I have a feeling that the power of positivity is the way he is as a coach, it's the way he communicates with his team, because I think that's who he is as a person.
Yeah, definitely. David, anything you want to add to that about, I know you're obviously a coach, been coaching for a long time, about kind of the balance between, being friendly outwardly, but also being able to coach guys and get on them when they need to. Because we have seen glimpses of that in practices and during games. I mean, we've seen Hubert get fired up, but he does kind of give that outwardly, very friendly kind of vibe to the players and when he talks to the media and whatnot.
I think that's one of the big challenges to go from assistant coach to head coach, because as assistant coach, you're usually the conduit.
The good guy, kind of,
Yeah. It's good cop, bad cop, and the assistant coach is usually the bad cop. It's don't listen to how he said it. Listen to what he said. Look, coach doesn't really mean what what he said or how he said it to you. You just gotta. He's trying to make you a better player. You want the kid to get the message, but you're really the one that has to soothe it over.
Yeah.
So. You build that relationship, and that has to change as the head coach. Now that's Brad Frederick and Jeff Lebo and Sean May's job. Mm-hmm. And that message, you can still be positive, but you can't be that same guy. You can't be an assistant coach and just change the title. You've got to provide the leadership and the vision to that program. So I think for any assistant coach that goes to the head coach job, that's a big change that has to happen. And quite frankly, sometimes I think ADs, they have some hesitancy to hire an assistant coach in the head coach job. And that's one reason why they want to know if that is going to carry over, or that they feel like that the hire is going to be able to make that transition. So I think I'll take your guys' word. You're closer to it than I am as far as what his attitude is. And from everything I've seen and personally and on television and what we watch through the games and just in his interviews, there's no reason to think Hubert's not who he is. I mean, if nothing else, he's obviously a very genuine person.
Yeah.
And Jacob, let me add to that too. And I'd like David's thoughts on this because he's had to use tough love. Roy was phenomenal at the tough love thing. Roy's one of those guys that, and I've had players tell me this, I'm not going to name names. I've had conversations with a lot of guys who played for Roy, off the record stuff. And Roy could say things sometimes that would really sting. But when they would leave and they would think about it, it would make sense to them. And it often might take a couple hours to resonate. I had one player tell me that he laid awake at bed at night one time because of something Roy said in front of the team about him and to him. It was very critical. But he's not just critical in, you suck, you're not doing this right. There would be something else that would follow through. That would sort of be the cleansing of the dirtiness of the comment, the difficulty of the comment rather. And that always resonated later. And and he showed up. He didn't sleep much that night, but he showed up to practice the next day, and he said he had a lot of vitality, and he kind of clicked, and he understood what Roy was saying. It took time, but he understood it. There was a tough love. They knew in the end. Yeah, they don't like. It's like a kid. They don't like what the parent's saying to them, but then they go to their room, and a couple hours later, like, that's right. I got to do better on this. The players were like that too. They understood that it was tough love from Roy. That Roy loved them to death. Mm-hmm. But he had to coach them and lead them. He had to whip the horse, so to speak, to get to the finish line. Mm-hmm. And we don't know about Hubert. There's 12 games. There's 8.5 months, as he loaded to last night. It's going to be a lot of time. I said before the season, David, we did a podcast talking about this. It might take a couple of years before we really know, because Hubert has to go through this and figure out how to do it as well. Mm-hmm. Roy has told us many times that, in his third year at Kansas, when they went to the national title game and lost to Duke, he was a different communicator then than he was when he won the 2017 title at Carolina, because it's an evolutionary process. Mm. So Hubert is at the very beginning. He's Dorothy on the third brick of the yellow brick road, and he's trying to get to Oz. Mm. And Dorothy was a lot wiser when she got to Oz than she was when that journey started. Yeah. So that's kind of where he is. So that question's a great question, but I don't think it's one we're going to be able to answer with a lot of confidence for a while.
Yeah, I think it's just too early to tell for sure. But it'll be fun to kind of see how that evolves over time too, and watching that. So good stuff on that. Was a good question from GD.
And by the way, I apologize. This is the first podcast we've done during the day. We usually do them at night after everybody's settled down. So I've got family members going through the house after they get out of the shower. And dogs.
I like the ambiance.
We're having real life. You're seeing real life.
Well, that's all right. It adds a little bit of entertainment value to what's going on, and at least it's not Dina with the cat plopped on her head. So
you'll be worse. You ain't had a cat jump.
None of us will ever be able to top that. The only thing that could top that is if Amazon or FedEx delivers something, and my dogs come in here and they put up a front, like I said, Poland trying to defend Germany in 1939.
It's true though, man. That dog is ready to go when that happens. So. Good question.
And they're boxers, so they're loud.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. Well, hopefully we dodge that bullet in the next, 45 minutes or so, but we'll see what happens. Next question, actually from GD and 44 once again. Another good question. David, I'm going to direct this one more towards you, and AJ, you'll hit it on it as well, because obviously you'll have some good insight on this, but I'm going to direct this one towards David first. So it's a little bit long, so bear with me. Hubert Davis talked about multiple defenses, in quotations, from his introductory press conference through the summer. From GD's 44's perspective, he says, personally, I haven't seen any multiple defenses at all, unless you count playing man-to-man and using different variations of playing the pick and roll. He said, going back to the Kentucky and Tennessee games were two glaring examples of man-to-man defense not working at all, in his opinion. So the question is, why hasn't Hubert Davis and his staff changed the defenses in either of those games? The reason I want to direct it towards David first is because I know David does a lot of the film reviews for these games when he talks about offense and defense. So, David, do you agree? Was there no changes in defense in those two games? And if not, do you have any idea maybe why they didn't switch to a zone, if that's something that like G. Dean's talking about, Hubert has kind of hit on since the moment he took the job.
Yeah, we've not seen zones or anything like that yet. Now, they have made some changes in their man-to-man structure. Now, it's not necessarily happened during the game. And I know there was some criticism from North Carolina fans for no in-game adjustments or anything like that, but I still lay that at the feet of the players. I don't think Phil Jackson could have adjusted in that Kentucky game. If the kid's not ready to go, they're not ready to play, it's not going to matter what you do. But the adjustments I've seen have been between games. Originally, we saw a lot of drop coverage in the ball screens. And then after Connecticut, they changed it to icing ball screens or running, maybe not totally, but it was a lot more noticeable on the side pick and rolls where they they iced and then played the screener's man on the other side of the screen. Last night, I noticed they did more switching 1 through 4 than I have seen them do in the past. In fact, they switched almost everything. The only thing, Baycott come off a ball screen or something like that, he didn't switch. But you saw 1 through 4 switching pin downs. You saw them switching cross screens, whatever, ball screens, handoffs, whatever you could think of. So, look, I feel like you've got to be a good man-to-man team. Mm-hmm. And, there's an old saying, if you can't play man-to-man, you can't play anything else. So I think evidently Hubert wants to do everything he can do to try to get this team to become a good man-to-man team, and they're not going to give up on it. Maybe they're saving zone for the conference. The most important game that they're going to play so far this year is going to be the next one because it's the next game, obviously. But this is going to be and the Virginia Tech game is going to be in conference. It's going to be very competitive. Ken Palm's going to have Virginia Tech rated a little bit higher. Of course, I think the setting, I believe they play at Chapel Hill. That's going to kind of offset, probably make North Carolina a slight favorite. Maybe they're saving it for the conference. I don't know. But here's the thing. I think going into ACC play, I think they want to do everything they can do to make sure they've got the best man-to-man defense they can possibly put on the floor, because for all intents and purposes, the season starts next week when they play Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. AJ,
I agree with David. Roy stuck with the man, and people used to go through we heard the same thing. Why didn't he switch to his own? Why didn't he apply full court pressure and all that kind of stuff? Because Roy knew that it took 3.5 months to become a really good man-to-man team. And you want to become a really good, borderline great man-to-man team when you get into March. And if you look at his title teams, they were all heavily criticized defensively, but they got better and better and better and better. And they were pretty damn good when they got to March. So I think that of all the things that Roy did, that's certainly one of the things that looks like Hubert has held on to and is applying. They did make some changes. David, you're right. Only the 5 didn't switch. The 1 through 4, they did switch. They said a lot of it was because App State ran more guard screens than any of the teams that they had played this year. And Hubert said they actually extended their defense after made baskets a little bit more, not to get steal or create chaos, but just to sort of slow App down. And I think because Carolina was really struggling sometimes to get set in its man-to-man defense against Kentucky, because Wheeler was pushing the ball, by putting a little bit more full court defense on there, not so much pressure, but just slow things down. It allowed them to get set a little bit more. But Virginia Tech's going to be interesting. If there's a zone in this team, I mean, that's a hard team to zone because they can shoot threes, but they also will drive. They have guards that can drive on Carolina. And one thing Carolina's really struggled with at times this year is defending the dribble drive from the top and from the wing. Kentucky's Exhibit A, Tennessee's Exhibit B. And Virginia Tech's going to try to use that recipe to beat them. So if there are other defenses that they have worked on that Hubert's comfortable going to, I think we might see it against the Hokies.
Yeah, It'll be interesting to see if that happens. Yeah, because he is right in terms of, we've heard Hubert talk about playing multiple defenses, but as of yet, we really
he did in October. Greg Barnes asked him in October, and Hubert went through the whole Dean Smith would adjust defenses in the middle of a possession.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Hubert said, he mentioned 1-3-1, 2-1-2, trapping, full court pressure, the run and jump, all that kind of stuff. But we haven't seen. I think they zoned one possession that wasn't an inbound this year. Mm-hmm. And they gave up a 3. And remember what Roy used to do? They'd go zone, give up a 3. He's like, well, the hell with that. We're not doing that.
Never doing that again. Yeah.
It's like Roy was looking for an excuse to not play zone.
Yeah, I think he was.
And more power to him because it worked pretty well for him.
Yeah, it definitely worked out.
Davis hadn't have brought up playing multiple defenses, people wouldn't probably ask about it, because I'll be honest, a lot of other places, the fan base, and they're not going to be as educated in a lot of places as North Carolina. In my opinion, there are probably only 4 or 5 basketball educated fan bases in the country, and that's where there's a big emphasis historically on basketball. So you can do the math on who those schools are. But even a lot of those places, they're not going to ask, well, are you going to play zone, or are you going to press, or are you going to do any of that? So I don't know if Hubert had not have said that, if it would be, as maybe a big some is what it is.
Yeah, it's a good point too. Another good question from G Dean 44. Appreciate those 2 questions. Those are really good ones. We're moving on to the next one. This is kind of for both of you guys. This is for both of you guys. We'll go ahead with that one. We'll start with you, AJ. This is from Rob Jones. We obviously know Rob Jones very well. Shout out Rob Jones for asking. He got a couple good questions in here. So this one's about Kerwin, Styles, and Dunn, who obviously have been kind of a big talking point, in particular Styles and Dunn, and kind of their lack of playing time this season. So the question Rob asks is, do you think it's more valuable for this team to have Kerwin Walton back on track, or to have Dontrez Styles and DeMarco Dunn develop into consistent contributors? AJ, what are your thoughts on that question? And then David, feel free to hit on that afterwards if you want to.
I would love to sit here and tell the people watching that I know what kind of players Dunn Styles are, but I don't, because Dunn's had a little bit of meaningful run here recently, but he's looked like a freshman who was like, oh my gosh, I'm on the floor against Kentucky in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. Kind of had, and that's not criticism. That's very normal for a lot of kids, especially when they weren't getting first half run against Elon, against Charleston, against Brown, against Loyola, those kind of teams. I was surprised to see him go in the game in Las Vegas. It was probably part of Hubert's desperation to try anything at that point. And it didn't work because I don't think Dunn was ready for it. So we don't really know what kind of players they are with respect to how they would be at the college level. So it's kind of hard to answer that question. I think that if Roy Williams was the coach, and I'm not going to go here very often, but I'm going to do it to make a point, Dunn and Styles would have been playing the first half of all these games. And now is the time of year when you start to trim that back. Maybe they stop playing the first half and the DNPs start to increase. But Roy would have put them out there just to get them out there, just to get them feel, just to see what they could do, get some stuff on film, keep them engaged and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes a kid needs to get on the court to take the next step. Not everybody is a great practice player. Some guys need the game as motivation. They need that fuel that a game provides them, even if it's just a couple of minutes. So, but we don't know because they didn't have that. I think as far as Kerwin goes, Kerwin has played in recent weeks like he's had confidence issues, and it would be completely understandable if he has. Human nature, as I've told you 1,000 times, Jacob, human nature is ever present in sports. It's a big part of sports. But I actually watched Kerwin last night during warm-ups. I sat down along the baseline and just watched him shoot. And he was out there shooting before anybody else. And even Armando and Brady were out there for a while. They went and sat down. They were talking. And Kerwin working on his form. He's got a whole routine he's going through because he needs that routine to be who he is. And I thought it was interesting that he looked really good on the 2 threes he hit last night. They were catch and shoot threes, which is what he is. Mm-hmm. He's not a pound on the floor shoot guy because he doesn't have the quickest release. He's not super mobile and all that kind of stuff, but he is a catch and shoot guy. And both those were kickouts from Baycott, by the way. Fueling the double, kicking it out, and there he is. So I don't know how much more there is to Kerwin's game. Kerwin worked a lot in the offseason. He put up that video about pounding it on the floor and driving. Maybe he's added a couple more dribbles to his game, but we don't really know because since Connecticut, we haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Go look at his minutes. They dropped off considerably after Connecticut.
Mm.
He was 2 for 18 from the middle of the Purdue game to the start of last night's game, and he didn't play in the first half last night. So, and he was 0 for 12 from 3. That's a shooter missing a lot of shots because the mind isn't right. David, I'm sure, can elaborate on that. So I think that if Styles could provide them what we think perhaps he can, meaning a 6'7" kid who's pretty strong with a lot of bounce, I think they could use that because this is not an overly athletic team. They need a little bit more bounce. That's why Anthony Harris plays, because they need his bounce. They need his vitality that he plays with. I think maybe in a perfect world, Dontrez Styles could give them that. In a perfect world, Dunn could give them maybe a little bit of spunk and give them a little shooter. I don't know if Kerwin's going to give them bounce or spunk just yet. We haven't seen a lot of that in his game. He played a lot last year because he provided them the one thing nobody else could. That's perimeter shooting. But they have perimeter shooting now. So Kerwin might not be the same commodity for this team that he was for last year's team, but I still think he can be a commodity. I think he gave him a lift last night, and the crowd certainly appreciated it. The crowd was pulling for that kid to score, and I got to be honest with you. Yeah, I'm human too, right? When he scored, I turned to Brandon P. I said, good for him.
Yeah,
I hope he knocks another one down because the kid needs it. You don't want the kid going through what he's been going through.
No, definitely not. Dave, anything you want to add about that and the kind of development of those guys?
Well, I was going to say, obviously, Kerwin Walton, but, Andrew did a great job there of basically reasons that I was going to give of bringing up the other side, obviously. And here's the thing. I think, obviously, Kerwin's shooting, and you look at the impact he had as a freshman, and just from watching it on television, it sounded to me like the roof went off the place when he hit the first three over there in the corner on fast break. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a spark. And the team needs spark.
Yep.
But like Andrew said, he's not necessarily going to give it athletically. He doesn't have the athleticism of a Dontrez Styles. And you've already got like you say, a good three-point shooting team, although they didn't shoot the ball well against Kentucky. But what if Walton's making shots? You go from being a good three-point shooting team to a great three-point shooting team. And think about the impact that being great three-point shooting teams have had. Baylor was a great three-point shooting team last year. Or go back to the Villanova's national championship teams. You thought they were never going to miss. So, there's something to be said for that. But Styles brings that athleticism, that bounce, but I still have to ask, they've got Leaky Black. Is he kind of like the same player Leaky Black is? We don't know.
Yeah, we haven't seen a lot.
They've not played enough. Having said all that, I think for every argument you make one way, there's a counter argument to be made the other. But this comes down to what Hubert Davis is comfortable with. There are some coaches who are going to be comfortable playing a lot of players. Roy Williams was comfortable playing a lot of players. Leonard Hamilton can find some way to play 13 players 30 minutes a game. And I don't know how he does it when there's only 200 available minutes.
And they all get drafted too.
Yeah, but he can do it. But for the most part, coaches want to play 8 or 9 players, and I've known some that even said they don't want to go deeper than 7. Mm-hmm. They want to have these guys that they can count on, give them time, and they're going to play mega minutes. And Hubert Davis may be that guy. Myself, I just feel like trust is a hard thing to build for a player when you're a coach, and you may not go – you want to go deep into the bench where everybody plays. But here's the difference in college and high school, and I'm sure they hear from parents or something, but if junior doesn't play in college, mom and dad's not going to be waiting outside the locker room on you when the game's over. Or they're not going to be waiting out at your car or whatever. So, there's a difference. So, like I said, I think to me he seems like a guy who may be more comfortable playing about 8 guys and playing double-digit minutes. And I totally understand that. And you've got to think, how many minutes are Baycott going to play? Are RJ Davis, how many minutes is he going to play? How many minutes is Caleb Love going to play? So if those guys right there play, let's say 30 minutes a game, there's 90 out of 200 available minutes right there. So you're left with about 110 minutes. So that's hard to find 7 or 8, 9 more players to divide it out among. So, that really limits it down. So it just seems to me in a nutshell that he's going to be kind of a 8, 9 player coach.
Yeah, that's what it seems like for sure.
And I said this, when the year started, this was a deep roster when you looked at it, and you could make a point for everybody getting playing time. And I said then, I just don't see how you can play 12 or 13 guys and just build consistency.
Yeah.
Some guys can, but for me, it would be tough.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is tough.
You don't press. It's not girls basketball in high school, so you're not pressing. Just breaks off people. So
I know what you mean. Yeah, and that's basically what we've seen from Hubert is kind of the 8, 9 man rotation. Really haven't seen him go too much over that, and I wouldn't really expect that to change in ACC play either. If we're being honest, you think if he was going to switch it up, he would have done it already. But good question from Rob Jones on that one as well. So, moving on to the next one. This is another one from Rob Jones. David, this is more directed towards you. This is a first basketball recruiting question of the day. So a good question here from Rob as well. It goes, with the 2022 class seemingly locked up, should Hubert be spending more time on 2023 prospects? Here's his reason. He said, I read various interviews with players on Carolina's list, in quotations, but they don't say much about UNC, leading me to believe communication isn't that frequent right now. Is he going to miss out on important relationship building time if he waits until after the season to pick things up? Good question from Rob. Do you agree with kind of that? Have you been kind of hearing the same thing? And do you think he should be spending more time on 2023 prospects than at least Rob thinks he is at the time from what he's kind of gathered?
I think that he, just like we talked about narrowing it down with a rotation, I think he narrows it down with a recruiting rotation. It doesn't look to me like Hubert Davis is going to be a guy who just throws around offers and most blue bloods don't. John Calipari never has double-digit offers in a class. He's offered about 8, I think, so far in the 2023 class. And, man, that's a ton for him. Duke doesn't do it. Kansas does probably more than the others. But, yeah, if you're Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, you can select. Mm-hmm. And – so that's the thing. So I think he's in a point where he says, okay, we're going to identify and we're going to put all our ducks in a row right there. We're going to push all the cards in on these guys. G.G. Jackson, full staff in Las Vegas. They've given him all the attention. Well, they've already got Simeon Welcher, who's a very good prospect. We saw him last Friday night against Camden, and he was really impressive. So you've got him. You've got and they're going in. So if you can get him and G.G. Jackson, that's 2 huge ones. That's 2 top 15 players, probably going to end up top 10 players in the class of 2023. And then they may go, another route or 2. But you've got to look now. You've got transfer portal. We're going to go there. There's not a big emphasis now on signing 4 or 5 guys early as there used to be. And one other thing is, too, you've got a lot of guys on that roster right now.
That's a good point.
We don't know who's going to be back, who's not, and what happens if you think there's going to be some guys that don't come back and they do. And now you've got 4 or 5 commitments and you don't have 4 or 5 open spots. You're in a mess. So I think you've got to be careful. And I go back to the summer. It started to really be obvious in July when they could get out on the road. North Carolina coaches Hubert's kind of worked this thing a little different. They don't have one guy on this court and one coach on another court. and one coach at another. They don't have two coaches at Adidas and one coach at Under Armour and two coaches at Nike. They don't have all that. They traveled in a pack. So if you watch them recruit back in July, every coach that was there was together and they watched a select few players. Okay. And they really focused, and you could tell if you followed them around in July, you could tell who they wanted to recruit, who they were going after. And it became obvious, like I said, they went and watched Will Shaver, and I'm trying to remember another player that they watched, and they walked right by Isaac Trout. And Isaac Trout was a guy that I really liked, and I said, whoa, they're not recruiting. And then there was a question about some other kids maybe in July, and they never went to any of the games. And you would have three coaches at another floor watching a player. So it was obvious who they were going after. So when they go after a kid, they're giving them all their attention. And to me, that hasn't changed here. You know, they're all in on Gigi Jackson. So if you can get Simeon Wilcher, if you can get Gigi Jackson, man, that is one heck of a recruiting class starting out, and it's more in quality than in quantity. And I go back to quantity. We don't know yet how many spots they're going to have open, and in a follow-up with that, the transfer portal changes everything.
Yeah.
And they know they'll – yeah, I agree with you on that. And – the roster man, Mac Brown's talked a lot about that in football, that because originally they were going to take 14 because that's all they knew they could take, but they knew there would be a lot of fluctuation there. They ended up with 17. They'll end up probably with a couple more in the February process, the signing period, but it's not dissimilar to basketball, it's just smaller numbers in basketball. But that's interesting that Hubert, when he dives into this and does this for the first time, he's got all these roster management issues to deal with, but it probably was something that would have stressed Roy more than Hubert, because Roy had a way he did things for years and years and years. And so much has changed in college sports in the last couple of years. So I love when you pointed out, when you saw them about Isaac Trout, and that was like, that's all the inside intel you ever need right there. So I kind of like it as a site that covers recruiting. I like that they do it this way, because I don't think that there's going to be nearly as many mixed signals with what this staff does and who they're interested in as there are with other staffs. And I'm not saying that was the case with Roy at all. That wasn't. But a lot of sites that cover recruiting, they get a lot of mixed signals from the staff. And with Carolina, I think it's pretty simple. I like that they do that. And I think it actually is a pretty powerful approach.
I could take 90% of the sites on Rivals and cover back recruiting with them. And I could do what I've done at other sites that I've worked at before. And that is put out content. And because I could go through and look at a different player every day that they have contacted, that they've gone to watch, and do it all the way through the winter and then start back to spring and do a new batch. And I looked up and I've done 45 basketball recruiting stories on different kids in 1 month. And, and I'd be cranking out, okay, I've got 3 different players tomorrow, Andrew, that they've contacted. But the thing is, it's frivolous. It's just basic. It's people want to read that stuff, but it's fake news for 95% of it. So we know what we're getting. And right now, the eggs are in the basket with Gigi Jackson. They've got Wilcher. And that's the thing to watch now. That's where they're going, man. And so you're talking about 2 guys that come in as freshmen. If they can get Gigi with him and Wilcher, doesn't matter who's on that roster. They're coming in and they're making a major impact right off the bat. They're both different dudes.
Mm-hmm. And in the following class behind that, they're doing that, I think, with Jaron Stevenson too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's early, but they'll find more. They'll find more 2024s. I go back when Nas Cunningham, the number 1 player in the country, North Carolina, he's probably going to take a visit in January, the number 1 2024 player in the country. And
2024.
They've not started recruiting him yet and contacting. But the thing was from them, we're going to take a visit because we know they're going to start contacting.
Yeah.
So
I was very impressed that they're approaching it that way. That's going to be an interesting recruitment to follow. And Jacob, I agree with you. 2024. Wow.
Yeah, it's like, wow. It's wild. I mean, I interviewed a 2024 football recruit like a year ago, and I was sitting here like, dude, you're like in middle school right now. It was just crazy. He's really talented. I think Assad Brown's his name. He's a guy that Carolina's going after pretty hard from Virginia Beach. But yeah, it's wild to think 2024, right? But yeah, really good question there from Rob Jones as well about basketball recruiting. We got two more real quickly. One of them should be a very quick answer, and the next one is from is a little bit unrelated to Carolina, but I do think it's an interesting question, kind of about some stuff that's going on around the country. So this one's more directed towards you, AJ. This is kind of the quick one. I don't think it'll take too long for time purposes, but just Wooly51 was just curious if there was any update on Puff Johnson. What's his status? How close is he to playing? Any idea kind of what the deal is with Puff? And I know he's back kind of warming up and on the bench.
Yeah, he looks fine. He's always a guy who's happy during warmups. He's got a big smile, and I think the teammates like him a lot. He might be, I don't know if he's a jokester enough. I don't know enough. We're still not super close to the players like pre-pandemic.
Yeah, COVID and everything. Yeah,
been around him more, and so I get a little bit better feel than I had no feel last year for the most part. But I get the sense that Puff is a guy that everybody on the team likes a lot. So from a basketball standpoint, he's not 100% healthy as far as I understand. He was just in a boot 10 days ago. Just came out of it about maybe 10 days ago. This is just my opinion. This isn't any inside information at all. I think that there's a lot of patience there with the Puff side and with the Carolina side. And he's got his brother as living, breathing proof of the benefit, the value of patience. Because remember, Cam played a little bit his freshman year at Pitt, then got hurt, redshirted, played some his sophomore year, then played a little bit more, and then he graduated and transferred to Carolina, and he even had to have patience there. He had to kind of feel his way around, and it wasn't until his second year at Carolina when he really figured things out and turned himself into an NBA player. And I remember talking to his dad at the end of his junior year at Carolina, and his dad saying that, Cam's intent on becoming an NBA player. And I thought, wow, NBA player, that's a pretty big aspiration there. But they knew what they were dealing with. His dad played the game at Pitt. His dad understood the game. They had a big picture plan and vision. And I would imagine they're approaching it the same way with Puff. Puff, everybody gets last year back. So last year didn't happen for Puff. And by the way, he was playing in the first half of every game until he got hurt. This year, because of the injury and because of how Hubert's handling things, I actually would be surprised if Puff gets into a game. I think that they could use this as his redshirt year. So theoretically, he would be in the class of 22, right? Because he would be a redshirt freshman next year when Nickel and Trimble and all those guys come in. I think take the long-term approach with Puff. I think there's going to be a lot of patience there. They have faith in the program and the staff that think good things can happen down the road at North Carolina. I think he's a useful player in time, and we'll revisit this conversation maybe in 2 or 3 years and see, A, if Puff is still in Chapel Hill, which I have no reason to believe he wouldn't be, and B, he'll be an older, mature player. And let's remember, Cam was not very highly regarded coming out of high school. His 2 offers were Iona. I think he had 3, Iona, Marist, and Pitt. And the Pitt offer was because he was a legacy. He's from the area, and his dad played there. Puff was a top 50 player. Pretty much everybody wanted Puff. So the natural ability that people saw in him at 17 was much more significant than what they saw in Cam. So be patient with Puff. Don't expect anything really this year. But I think moving forward, Puff could be a part of things, and there is a higher end potential there. I think he's got a chance to be a nice player. And hell, Cam's a pretty good NBA player, so that's a pretty big bar to climb to.
Yeah.
Let me chip in just for a second. We talked earlier about Dontre Styles playing that spot, and when I say that spot, I'm talking about a bigger wing, a bigger perimeter player. And that's one thing I looked at earlier in the year, and I said, they kind of got a log jam at that spot. So you got Leaky Black, you got Puff Johnson, and you can say what you want to about Dontre Styles. He has played more than Puff Johnson, maybe not a whole lot, but anything to be more than what. But so you got that. And one thing I noticed last night, North Carolina went really big. They put Justin McCoy in at the 3 spot. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Yeah.
They played I'm looking, I went, my goodness, this is a big lineup. They've got McCoy and, a combination of Manick, Garcia, and Baycott on the floor. So, they really went to that. So, and there's another thing when you're talking about Dontrez Styles and Puff Johnson may not play at all. And I meant to say this earlier. It looks like Hubert may be looking more, maybe McCoy at the 3 than some of these other guys because he kind of tinkered around with it last night.
Mm-hmm. When he did that, that was that flurry of offensive rebounds they got. McCoy got an offensive rebound, a really beautiful one. Then he came in from the wing. It wasn't a on the block offensive rebound. It was a 3-spot offensive rebound. He got it, fed it out to Caleb, and because of the way the play went, the lane was open. Caleb took it right to the rim, scored, drew the foul. And that play was created by Justin McCoy's hustle and his ability to get to the ball. So I think that was one of those times that Hubert maybe was just looking at something, trying to look at something different. Roy used to look at combinations all the time. And I kind of like that. I like the toughness and the little bit of the spirit that McCoy plays with. He's not overly athletic, but he can get a little extra edge in there. And not that Leaky doesn't. Leaky's more finesse, but sometimes you need to go at that guy who doesn't mind putting on shoulder pads and a helmet and mucking it up some. And Justin McCoy can give you that. Tony Bennett all the time said last year that when they needed that, he would stick Justin in the game for 5 minutes and he would get it from him almost every time.
I may be off just by a spot or two, but according to Ken Palm, I was looking at it last night. North Carolina is like maybe from an average height standpoint, the 16th biggest team in the country. He's got a stat on that where they average all the heights up. So I think they were number 16 out of 360 odd teams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with Puff, but. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a talented kid, and you get another red shirt the year this year, and you're kind of like a freshman next year, and you got 4 years to really improve. So, I mean, it might not be a bad idea for Puff when you think about all his injury issues and what he's gone through in the first couple of years, and when you consider, Hubert's kind of his goal, which it seems like to just play 8 or 9 guys, because that's what we've seen for most of the year. So even if he comes back, does he even fit in? I don't know if that happens. So it'll be interesting to see. Last question, though, guys, and this is the last one. Like I said, this one's non-Carolina related. So if you guys, and I thought it was an interesting question, I don't have a ton of understanding about, what's going on with some of this stuff. So if you guys don't know much about it either, feel free to say it. We won't even go into it. But with the recently announced basketball investigation results and penalties for NC State, which I know everybody's heard about, what are your thoughts on that process, how it went down, what they got, and what it means for other programs like Arizona and Kansas who have had similar things in the past? Anybody that wants to dive into that, feel free. I don't have a ton of
I'll dive in quickly. I don't know much about it. I haven't had a chance to soak it in because I've been swamped with football, basketball stuff. I just think that I know this. I've got sources in Indianapolis, as you well know, Jacob.
Yep.
And I don't think that postseason bans are going to happen to people who were not a part of the problem anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was glad to see that State didn't get a postseason ban because nobody in the program right now had anything to do with it. It would be an absolute shame if Kevin Keats got a postseason ban. Now they got to beat Wright State. They got to win games, and they're not doing that. Yeah,
they got to win that one. Yeah,
they're gonna inflict their own postseason ban if they're not careful. But as far as NCAA punishment goes, I think that kind of stuff is going to be a thing of the past. I don't know what they could do to punish now because NCAA's heads are going to be spent. I don't want to go too long on this because we do have to end this soon. Because I actually got Mac Brown coming up here in a few minutes.
Was that the whole Oklahoma State thing, Andrew? A lot of people are amazed Oklahoma State got a ban and North Carolina State did.
Yeah, but I think Oklahoma State's situation was so egregious and it was so institutional. NC State's wasn't nearly as much. NC State had a dirty coach.
Yeah, it was a coach more than anything.
When they hired Mark Godfrey, they had to know something was going to happen. Just like when Carolina hired Butch Davis, you had to know something was going to happen, right? It didn't take a rocket scientist to see that. Yeah. So in hindsight's 2020. I'm just glad State didn't get a ban because it wasn't justified. Now, but Auburn didn't get one. But they got the same guy in charge still. So if you still have the same people in charge, I think those things will happen. Mm-hmm. But if the house is being cleaned, I generally don't think we're going to see bans moving forward.
Yeah, it's kind of not fair too. And like you said, when it's a whole nother regime, whole different players. I mean, Godfrey was a long time ago. It feels like it was forever ago now. I know it wasn't as long as we think it was, but that's a whole other regime.
I covered a good part of his regime there, and he was not the most enjoyable guy to cover. He was very conversational with the media. I heard a lot of things about him that just wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's too bad. That's too bad because that's a pro. I know this is a Carolina thing, but that's a program that has a tremendous history back in time. And it'd be great for the area to see them rekindle that. If you were to see Wake, Duke State, and Carolina really good, it'd be great for basketball in this area. When I was covering all four at Fox, there was 1 week in December, I think it was before Christmas, in which all four were in the top 10 that week. And that was great for my job because everything I wrote about was getting a lot of readers. So that was cool.
I can imagine. Yeah, it is good.
I had a buddy got in a cuss fight with Godfrey in the airport.
Your buddy has a line that he could stand in for that.
Yeah, I'm about to say that's probably happened a few times based on some things I've heard, but we won't go into detail. I'm sure Carolina fans are licking their lips to hear it, but we won't do that. We'll save y'all from that one in this podcast. But
we'll do the Godfrey podcast after I retire. Okay.
Yeah.
After midnight.
I'm going to do a podcast about a lot of people after I retire.
After midnight. I like that title.
Cinemax at night, right?
Yeah. Everything comes out at night, right? But yeah, that's it for the questions on this for the subscriber questions.
You just dated yourself, my friend.
We had appreciate everybody. We actually had a couple other questions as well that were more related to kind of.
We're going to do more of this.
Yeah.
We're going to do more of this.
And there was a lot of questions that were directed in terms of people thinking that we had access to watching practice, a lot, which we don't. We've only been able to see one open practice this year. So I had to kind of skip out of those. So any questions about, us being able to watch practice on a consistent basis, just we don't get to do that very often. So appreciate everybody.
For the next one we do, on that last subject, I'll get my buddy Will Wade to sit in with us.
Hey, I'm all for it.
Go.
The more the merrier, man.
How about a conversation with Will Wade and Mark Godfrey?
I love it. We got podcast ideas flowing over here. That'd be a fantastic.
With a Butch Davis interlude.
Exactly. But that's it. Appreciate everybody who chimed in, put the questions in. If you want to get involved and be able to ask these questions, you got to sign up for TarHillIllustrated.com. It's just $8.33 a month. A great gift idea around this time of the year as well. So if you're looking for a last minute kind of gift, because I know these will be going out around Christmas Eve, hop on. $8.33 a month. Great time to do it. Appreciate everybody that asked.
I'll see you guys.
All right, guys. We'll see y'all later. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.